I know we just finished our time of confession, but I'm going to add one. Have you ever pulled up to church before and realized that you left your Bible on the table? Have you ever done it on a day you were preaching? So the good news is God has blessed us with a wealth of options. So I apologize for the seeming unprofessionalism, but I promise this is the real Bible. So our first reading today will be from Psalms 81. We'll read the first verse and then verses 10 through 16. Psalm 81, starting in verse 1. Sing aloud to God our strength. Shout for joy to the God of Jacob. Then jumping to verse 10. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide and I will fill it. But my people did not listen to my voice. Israel would not submit to me. So I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own counsels. Oh, that my people would listen to me, that Israel would walk in my ways. Then I would quickly subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their foes. Those who hate the Lord would cringe before him, and their doom would last forever. I would feed you with the finest of the wheat, and with honey from the rock I would satisfy you. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let's go ahead and we will have our reading from the gospel now, which will be in the book of Luke, and this will be also the passage for our sermon. And this one will also be broken up with just a first verse and then moving on. So it'll be Luke 14, verse 1, then 7 through 14. So starting in verse 1 to set the stage, on one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. And then jumping down to verse 7, when he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited both of you may come to you and say, give this person your place. And then in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you're invited, go and sit down at the lowest place so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. So, all right, we're going to set this down. I apologize. You know, the thing is, you get used to, you think habits are gone because you haven't needed them for a decade. When I worked as a minister, I had an office that I kept my, and this is insane, I know, but I have multiple Bibles. And I kept my work Bible there. And so I never transported a Bible to and from. And it is really by the grace of God that I've gotten this far without ever leaving my Bible at home, because it's just not a habit when I'm preaching to bring the Bible with me, which is the weirdest thing to say. But I thank everyone for their patience. So I wanted to open today with a story from my personal life, a little bit of my history. My grandmother is who I want to talk about. Wonderful woman. My daughter actually is named for her. And is that okay that I shared that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. I didn't get permission first. Normally I do. My daughter is named for her because she was, I wish she knew what an inspiration she was to me. She passed away when I was in the 8th grade. And when you're 14, it's a little, you're starting to get the words, but it's a little tricky to really express to the people around you what they mean to you. So sometimes I wish that she could have known what an inspiration she was to me. She was a very strong woman, and she was originally going to be, she grew up, Great Depression era. I don't know. You know, it's like all family history. You think you know it until the moment comes, and then you realize you just have the general idea. Great Depression era, she was born, and she grew up on a farm. She was going to be a Catholic nun until she met a young veteran who was planning to start and this is true, coat hanger factory. That's right, I am a descendant of the Midwest coat hangers fortune, yeah. So you can see how that worked out. She married a man who was in fact my grandfather, and they had 7 children together. God bless anyone with more than 2 kids. This is not a judgment call. I couldn't do more than 2 kids. When we had Matilda, our second, our pediatrician at the time said to us, she goes, "Do you like basketball?" I said, "Yeah." "What's that got?" She said, "Right now there's 2 of them and you're playing man defense." She goes, "When you have a third, you go to zone defense and they're going to dunk on you all the time." And that resonated with me, and I was like, okay, all right, we're good. So we only have 2 kids. My mom was the 6th of 7 children. My grandmother had 7 kids that she frankly raised on her own. My grandfather was not there a ton to help. He was out wheeling and dealing, doing business. And they separated in the early 80s, late 70s. My grandmother was, the first single woman of her age that I knew, which is, she's my grandmother, of course. And she was she loved her family. She didn't need anyone. She wanted people around her. She didn't need them. And I thought that was really cool. And that really kind of became for me a model of independence, but also vulnerability. And she didn't really bake cookies. She wasn't that kind of grandmother. She chain smoked and watched Cubs games. And she was awesome. And she, in 1999, was diagnosed with cancer of the pancreas. So she, of course, bought a carton of cigarettes on the way home. And when she got home, said, "Well, these aren't going to kill me," and went on with her life. We called her Nanny. That was Nanny. She was the best. When I was a little boy, I remember very clearly she had in her basement, I remember the toys so vividly. They were some Lincoln logs, these very brightly colored plastic fences that you could connect together, and 2, I don't think they were ceramic, but kind of stone dogs, and a little bowl to give the dogs water. And I don't know if she had other toys or if those were just the only ones I really liked, but I remember playing with those toys and constantly like, the dog's gonna drink the water. And I remember that, and she had in her basement this beautiful box that she kept the toys in, and it had a cross on top of it, which she was deeply faithful to her Catholic faith. Everything had a cross and a crucifix on it in her home. That did not shock me to see the cross on this box. And I would go to it, and we'd come over, and she'd say, "All right, Jake, go play," and I'd go down to the basement and get the toys out and play with them. And I remember, though, one day, her and my mom having, I don't want to say fight's not the word, but a disagreement that was a little more intense than usual. And she kept saying, "Mom, it's really weird." And she said, "He doesn't know." And I just thought, oh, okay. So fast forward, fast forward. You flash back, you fast forward. Fast forward to the year 2000. It's the new century, the new millennium. And my grandmother passed away in April of 2000, pancreatic cancer, as we said. And she, at her funeral, we were sitting, and it was a very somber time, as all funerals tend to be. And we were both celebrating and mourning her. And she was, I remember, in her coffin up front with a closed casket. And the priest was praying over her and had incense. And in the middle of the ceremony, I stared really hard, and I got to thinking, that coffin is familiar. I have seen that before. Someone figured it out. I have seen that before. And I leaned over to my mother at what felt like an appropriate time in her mother's funeral. I waited for a pause, and I said, Are they going to bury Nanny in my toy box? And she didn't want it to go to waste. She bought it about 10 years ago and wanted to make sure that it didn't just sit around doing nothing, so she stored her toys in it. So somewhere out there in the Kansas City area at the the graveyard of the resurrection. I don't remember the exact name of it. My wonderful, beloved grandmother is in a state of decomposition in my childhood toy box. So, any questions you've had about me, I hope that answers it. I would think that it's all pretty clear at this point. I remember this that's... I can't believe I just told that story in public. It's you know, and all joking aside, it makes sense. You know, like I said, I pointed out Great Depression era. That woman threw nothing out. Nothing went to waste. Everything got used. We were not going to buy a solid pine box and just put it in the garage. Sometimes the answer has been right in front of us the whole time. See what I did? And sometimes it can be even painfully obvious what has been going on, what is going on, will be. Bring us back to Jesus. We are at this dinner on the Sabbath with a Pharisee. And just a couple of key vocabulary words here for you. Pharisees were a group of teachers of the Jewish faith that were actually, the Pharisees end up being the ones who mastermind the plot to kill Jesus. So we remember them very much as the villains. Rightly so. You don't get to have God killed and then call yourself the hero. We remember them as the villains of the story. They were actually very popular at the time and kind of thought of as like the people's movement. The Pharisees were the more about the people movement of, if that tells you anything about the trends back then. And so the Pharisees are having a Sabbath dinner. So Sabbath, remember, is the holy day, the day of rest. Who you have your dinner with is kind of a big thing. It's a ceremony. It is a very, very sacred occasion. And it's also an honor to be invited. And so Jesus is participating in the Sabbath meal with a Pharisee. So this is probably, and I don't want to swear to this, so if someone tells you otherwise, trust them. But this is probably on a Friday night because in the Jewish calendar, the day begins when the sun goes down. So sundown on Friday is the start of the Sabbath, Saturday. So it's Friday night, Jesus is having dinner, and this is a big deal, but he's being watched carefully, right? So we're fairly far into the book of Luke right now, and at this point, the Pharisees, who originally probably thought Jesus was going to be on their side. There's a lot of theories out there that part of why they hated him so much is because with the things he was teaching, initially the Pharisees probably thought Jesus would be one of their biggest supporters. And then he ends up, saying some pretty straightforward things to them about how they're doing things. And so they're having dinner, and Jesus notices he's being watched. They're looking for an opportunity to trip him up, and so Jesus teaches. And other things happen in between, but to be fair to the liturgy, I'm going to stick with the verses that were given today. And Jesus says, he teaches this lesson where he says, do not invite the rich, your family, the people that you could benefit from. Invite the people who could never repay you. He says, invite the poor, invite the sick, invite those that have no homes, invite those that have more needs than anything else, those who could never repay you, and spend your Sabbath dinner with them. Invite them in. And this is a statement about more than just give a meal to someone who's hungry, although that matters a great deal. Please don't hear me disregarding that. But what the Sabbath meal, so my wife Elise was not able to be here this morning, but she and I had this incredible opportunity back in April to join a group for a Sabbath meal. We were traveling for some work, and there was a gentleman who was an Orthodox rabbi, invited us to be a part of it. It was really cool because I had heard about these things as a theology student, had never got to participate in one. And so, Elise is just happy to make some new friends. I'm in full-on theology nerd mode, and I have the hat. Tell me everything. Tell me all of it. I want to know everything. And so we got to participate in this, and it was really kind of discussed that this is meant to be a ceremony that welcomes people in as part of your community. So what Jesus is saying here is not just share a meal. But Jesus is saying, share your community with those that would traditionally be outside of it. In this ancient world that Jesus lives in, there's a very clear hierarchy of who went where. And what Jesus is saying is that hierarchy does not matter. Do not spend your time with, okay, so we're going to go have dinner with them this week, and next week they're going to invite us to dinner, so it'll all even out in the wash. Jesus says, go find the people who have no community. Go find the people that have been left behind. Go find the people at the margins. Go find the people that fall between the cracks and invite them in and share this, the most holy part of your week, with them. And when I prepared this sermon, I came in ready to figure out how are we going to really emphasize the community, how are we going to, let's expand how we think about it. And after a day or so of reflecting on it, I kind of just hit this wonderful wall of, but isn't it obvious? Isn't the answer in front of us? Faith is a fascinating thing to me because obviously it has meant everything to me. I owe all of the good things in my life to my faith. And yet, we see it all throughout history. Any kind of a reading of history, you see faith of all kinds manipulated by the corrupt and the powerful to gain more power. And you see people who have no connection to the values that are being taught, taking those things and warping them just enough that they look familiar, but that they point us in a completely different direction. And yet, the answer is right there in front of us, all along. So my challenge to you this week, my message to you that really is Christ's message, that hopefully I have not embellished enough to wipe away what matters, is find the people in your world, in your circles, here in York, in the community around you, find the people that fall between the cracks, that they don't fit anywhere, that maybe they're a little lonely. Maybe they, it might not look like it did then. It might not be where beggars and sick people have to sit outside the city. Maybe it's somebody that lives in a different place. Maybe it's somebody that their life is always in upheaval. Maybe it's somebody that doesn't fit into the traditional molds that we have for family and for society and for neighborhood. And find those people and invite them in. Make them part of your community. Make them part of this community. Because what is this if not the most sacred part of our week? What is this if not our Sabbath meal? This is a time that matters. This is a time that all should feel welcome. This is a time where those who cannot find for the other 6 days of the week a place to belong should find it right here. So that's my challenge to you. That's my message to you. May you be blessed this week to see things the way that Jesus did, to see not any sort of person that belongs outside of our community, but only those that have yet to be invited in.